The bipartisan push for criminal justice reform is fueled in part by the staggering price tag of mass incarceration. This country spends some $80 billion to lock people up in federal, state, and local correctional facilities. Local jails are responsible for about a quarter of that cost, and St. Louis County is spending its fair share. To explore the necessary elements of change, what it would take to decrease the financial burden and reform St. Louis jails, please welcome Nancy McCarthy. She's this area's regional administrator from the Missouri Board of Probation and Parole. Welcome. Brendan Roediger, a professor at St. Louis University and civil rights lawyer working on racial profiling and court reform. Qiana Williams lives in St. Louis County and has been personally affected by the justice system. She is a mother and a paralegal at Arch City Defenders, a law firm that defends the homeless and the poor, among others. And Beth Huebner, a professor of criminology at the University of Missouri at St. Louis. In the spirit of full transparency, she's also leading the implementation of a grant to St. Louis County from the MacArthur Foundation Safety and Justice Challenge. Here to lead the conversation is the Atlantic's Juleyka Lantigua-Williams. Juleyka, that's all yours.
Hi, everybody. I really like your city. I hope to spend more than 8 hours here next time. I saw the arch. Yay. Missed my chance at a selfie. The taxi was going way too fast. So we're going to get right to it, right? That was a really good warm-up. Thank you, Ron. So I'm going to let Qiana actually exemplify for us some of the things that we need to be talking about more often. She's had some really telling experiences in the local criminal justice system. Qiana, if you would.
My story spans about 20 years. So there's no way that I could convey the gravity of it, but I will do my best. Imagine you or your child were pulled over for some kind of traffic infraction and locked up on the merit of that. You just pay it, right, and bail them out. Now imagine the same scenario where you were unable to bail out. I'll tell you what that looks like. It looks like 30 days in jail. It looks like a child without her parent. It looks like an inability to earn a living wage. It looks like living in a car. It looks like homelessness. It looks like me. I was unable to complete my education. I was unable to earn a living wage. I was unable to be the productive member of society that I've always wanted to be. Because the courts did not care about the time that I had spent in their jails. They only had a calculator tallying up what I was to pay. And when I couldn't, I was faced with more time in the jails. Thankfully, most of that is over now, and it's not so tragic for me anymore. But it should not have happened in this society where an able-bodied person, an able-minded person, has to suffer for so long, not being able to even complete school. When I couldn't get a decent job, I tried to go to school. Maybe I figured if I get a better education, then I could maybe earn more money. But right before finals, I was arrested and held for weeks. I'm not a criminal. My only interactions with the law has been based on poverty, my inability to pay tickets, warrants, insurance. A lot of people ask me why I kept driving. My answer to that is that's all I had. You know, I didn't have my own place to stay. The vehicle that I drove for so long, it took my daughter to school every day. It was the only constant in our lives was her education. And I was compelled to give her some sense of stability in that she didn't have to transfer schools. There was no school bus or no school to pick a child up, whatever address or non-address they happened to be at. So I took it upon myself to make sure that my child did not miss any days. However, I can't say that for the days that I was locked up in the jails here in St. Louis.
So Qiana, let me actually move the conversation from that, and thank you so much for really sharing that with you. It can't be easy to rehash that history. But Beth, you've been trying to figure out why this happens for the last year plus. What have you learned?
We've learned a number of things. So it sounds like what Qiana dealt with is some of the challenges of the municipal courts, is my understanding, right? So we find there's many different municipal courts in the area, and we find that people continue to have challenges to figure out, when court dates are held, how to pay these fines, and to have the means to pay them. So we've definitely been exploring that. We also have been working with the St. Louis County Jail, and one thing you talked about is waiting in jail. We've done a lot of research and looked at our clientele, and most of them don't need to be waiting for pretrial. So we've been working on expediting that process so people do not have to wait. If they do not have the means to pay that bail, then they can get out usually within 24 hours. Another thing she mentioned was services. So we have a lot of our community service providers here. I think that's one thing we have in St. Louis is a wonderful resource of services, but the problem is always linking people to those, and those also cost a lot of money. So we've been working to build relationships between criminal justice organizations and social services in the region.
Okay, so Brendan, Beth wants to build a bridge. You want to burn them all down. I'm being facetious.
Who said that?
Everybody you talk to, including NPR. No, you really want to see the current system replaced, right? So tell us what you would put in its place.
Yeah, I don't want to see it replaced. I want to see it abolished.
See?
So a lot of these, and I'm not trying to say that Atlantic is doing something that's been done before, but this has been done before, and we're now in a room at a fancy hotel with a bunch of people who were not on the streets, with a few exceptions. And thank you for being here, for those of you who were. It's the only reason we're having this conversation is because of Kayla Reed, because of Diamond Latchison, because of young women who stayed in the streets for months and months and months, and men. I see you. I'm often in the position of following Qiana or someone like Qiana and providing data to justify, to prove that what she's saying is true. And I want to say I'm really tired of that we have to be past that we have to just believe Qiana, and that we have to decide whether we're okay with what happened to her. We need to stop having to start from square one every time and have a discussion about whether this is racist. It's racist. It's definitely racist. Right? We live in a country founded on rape, torture, forced labor. That's where we live. We can't pretend otherwise. These systems exist as a natural sort of continuation of that system, and we need to be done with them. And if that means, and I know it terrifies you for the police and the judges are here, that some people are going to drive without insurance and not go to jail, I'm okay with it. I can live with that. I can live with my car getting hit by somebody that doesn't have insurance if it means that Qiana and Royal are okay. I really can. And if you can't, we're on opposite sides. You and I are. And this is not a time of unity. We're going to fight.
Okay, but we're not in a ring. It's sort of like a metaphorical, pugilistic, no intellectual holds bar kind of thing. So tell me what you would put in its place, because there has to be a system for
but you're talking
accountability.
about replacing a system that does not exist in most of the country and most of the world. Why would we replace it? Every liberal has some pet project that they ran to the forefront after Ferguson and said, we can replace municipal courts with this. We can have community courts. We can have social services. What is the social services intervention for somebody whose catalytic converter is broken? It's a catalytic converter, right? I mean, fundamentally, this is a capitalism problem. That's what we're talking about. Qiana is fine. There is nothing wrong with Qiana.
No one is saying anything's wrong with Qiana, but there has to be a fully accepted system of accountabilities, right?
Why?
So why?
What
Because otherwise, I
Qiana
run
do?
all the red lights.
Why would you do that?
That's why.
Why
And
would you do that?
It's not a good look if I'm running
why
all the
would you
red
do it?
lights. Why would I do it?
Why would you run all the red lights?
If I feel like there isn't going to be a cop around the corner to hold me accountable for that negligence, I might not think about it on a day that I'm feeling kind of frisky and I want to go fast. So tell me, how do you keep me from feeling frisky and going fast?
Well, I mean,
right?
the last week has certainly proven that you're in the majority. I like to think that most people, and I realize I'm wrong, but I still wake up and try to convince myself that most people would be decent to one another. And that most people would try not to hit each other with their cars, and that most things would be okay. I agree that there have to be consequences in any society for actually harming other people. I don't believe that most of the people in St. Louis County municipal jails have done anything to warrant that.
Let's see if, go ahead. It's allowed. Nancy, explain that look you just gave him. No, seriously.
No more coffee in the green room.
Exactly. Have you seen, post-Ferguson or even before Ferguson, right, and even before the DOJ's report came out, have you seen from within the system any concerted efforts for improvement? And what are those?
I've seen a lot of efforts. I work for the state of Missouri, and so I oversee probation and parole services for the St. Louis metropolitan area. And we deal with individuals who have been sentenced by the court or released on parole supervision. And really, when you look at what the role of corrections is, we're the response to the issues within the community. And so what we look for is what are the issues and the roots of crime. And we look at the issues of unemployment and substance abuse, mental health issues, literacy, and as Beth pointed out, we have a wealth of social service agencies within the community who are willing to come together. We have STAR, which is funded by the Lutheran Foundation, and that's a group of social service agencies, and what our role is to help educate ourselves in the community on the issues of the day. That has helped us in terms of looking at the issues of the young offender, of those individuals who suffer with trauma, and certainly there's no mistake that anyone who worked with or lived within the St. Louis area underwent trauma. Ferguson 1000. It was an effort that was led by Dave Spencer and by Dr. Lance McCarthy in terms of looking at employment opportunities for individuals and not just getting individuals who are just out of prison and jail jobs, but looking at helping the middle class move to the upper class.
So what are some of the tangible results of that? Like in terms, for example, of the mental health and crisis interventions, has that reduced the number of intakes at the jails? Has that resulted in more admissions into mental health?
I think I'm not an expert in terms of the admissions to the jails, but what we've seen in our own population is an increase in employment. And so when an individual has a chance for employment, they're able to provide for themselves and their families. We've seen increases on employment. One of the things that's also happening is the United Way has been working with us as a result of that in terms of examining what are the social services that we have in the community and what are the gaps. Where are the areas that we need additional help and resources? The United Way has worked with Dr. Faye Taxman from George Mason University in terms of doing an assessment of the community to help us identify that. And certainly the work of Beth through UMSL and with the MacArthur Foundation in terms of helping identify what we can do differently and then teaching us in terms of how to do our jobs better.
Okay, so here's a question for all of you. What don't we know yet, right? Because it sounds like there's a bunch of stuff that is irrefutable, if you talk to Brendan. And then there's a bunch of stuff that we're just beginning to quantify, right? And if you listen to Qiana's story, there are things that are just the way they always have been, right? So what is it that we don't know that we must know before we can truly get to any kind of meaningful resolution here? Qiana.
If I may.
Yes, please.
I don't think there's anything that
we don't
is
know.
not known.
Okay.
I think that a lot of things that were just discussed are already written in the laws. And you were talking about accountability, about running red lights.
As an
Where is
example.
that accountability?
Yeah.
Why aren't these laws being followed? This should have been, my inability to pay should have been taken into consideration 20 years ago.
Well, and I think, I think what the work that Brendan's doing is excellent. I don't think we're actually in as much contrast as people would think. I just think right now we have people who are coming into the jail who have mental health challenges, who have substance abuse needs, and they need to be addressed now. So who comes to the jail, and we need to address them. And I think we have best practices on how to help those people. We have gender responsive programming, we're looking at trauma. So we're just addressing it right now with what we have and trying to serve the community the best that we can. However, I would ask, we are in a capitalist society. I've traveled to many European countries. They have similar problems. The scales are different, right? But what would we replace this with? I think that's the challenge. That's why right now, I have to focus on how do we help the people in the community who need help right now, and I'm not sure how we would replace that.
Okay.
So what about the people who don't have substance abuse problems? What about the people who do not have mental issues?
Sure. No, absolutely. I think fines and fee reform, I think that's why I said what Brendan's doing is fantastic. And I think that's why if people come to the jail, we are trying to release them quite quickly. But part of the challenge is that we're working from two different camps, right? So I'm a boring professor doing research, helping people in the community and programs. But I can't, or I'm not very skilled at, lobbying. I don't know how to change the rules. The fines and fees and laws are something that I'm not able to change. So I think what we need to move forward is how can we all get together to work, right? I think having us at war is helping no one. So I am more than happy to help change those laws and to learn more and provide research for those. But I think they cannot be at the opposite end of the spectrum. I think for us to really affect change, we need to all work together.
Okay.
I agree with Qiana.
Really?
Change. You're
So
still
let me
talking
ask
about
you.
change.
Let me ask you to clarify, because I feel like maybe you're saying that there's an imbalance of accountability, that residents are being held extremely accountable, whereas people in authority are just not being, and they have impunity. Would that be a better way to characterize it?
That is exactly the way that it is.
Okay.
These things should not have happened to me. There are laws. It's written into the laws.
Yeah.
And I'm being held accountable for my inability to pay my ticket, or not being able to get insurance when it expired.
Yeah.
I'm not a bad driver. It's not that I was running into people.
Right.
I just could not get my license reinstated and things of that nature. And I was in tiny cells with no toilets and no drinking water, with shoulder to shoulder with other women with arms and legs and heads on me for weeks. Being away from my children, being away from my family, not being able to put forth what I was put here to put forth.
Okay.
It's already written. The accountability that you speak of should be, it does have a place.
Okay, let me talk to you about cost, because there's also, a very pragmatic issue of it actually costs more to keep someone like you in jail than the dang ticket, right? And so municipalities and state level, how do they basically look at it fiscally from their end when all of these costs keep mounting as we are basically just recycling people through the jail?
Well, I don't work with the jails.
Right,
I work
but
with
you
the
do work
prisons.
with state budgets, and you do
We
look
do
at
work with state
costs
budgets.
per beds and things like that. So when, not specifically about the jails, when you're looking at your budgets, right, where is the balance struck in terms of keeping the population in, having beds, occupied, and having people who have outstanding, few dollars worth of things.
We do not incarcerate people, nor do we recommend revocation of individuals to go to jail because of lack of payment.
Okay.
Now, there are individuals who may owe restitution payments, and they may be payments that have been ordered by the court.
This is to the victims.
And this is to the victims.
Yep.
But we do not incarcerate individuals within the state system because they have outstanding fees. We look very carefully in terms of our prison beds. And we try to be very judicious, but we take who we are given to take. And so if a court orders someone into a prison, then it is our job to work with them and help develop release plans for them. We try to be very conscientious in terms of ensuring that we're incarcerating individuals who need to be incarcerated, and not because we're mad at them, and we're not mad at the individuals.
Okay.
So we work very hard with that, and that's where we really depend upon the community to help us with that. Okay. There is, despite what people think, there are very few individuals who go to prison the first time for a felony offense. Most times courts give them an opportunity of probation, and they allow for what's considered an SIS, a suspended imposition of sentence, which is not a conviction.
Okay.
Rarely is it someone who goes to prison the first time, and it's usually dealing with a very violent offense.
So we're going to take questions from the audience in about 20 seconds, but Brendan, do you think a modified version of that would in the interim be okay to implement here, where people wouldn't be sent to jail for these types of low-level infractions? Or do you think that it's just a complete waste of resources to continue with this system?
I mean, I agree that there's I happen to respect your work, and I don't in any way mean to be rude, but I don't believe the state should teach people personal responsibility.
Okay.
That's just a fact. And so with these sorts of offenses that are really about legislating, regulating the day-to-day life of people, I don't think the state has any business getting involved, and I don't think the state is acting on my behalf.
Okay. All right. 20 seconds are up. Who's right here in the front? Mike is coming to you. Please stand. Tell us who you are.
Eva Frazier.
Hi.
So you just talked about accountability and a problem perhaps with accountability for law enforcement and people who are enforcing laws. So people who are subjected to this type of thing often don't have recourse. For example, I have a friend who told me that she had been stopped twice when she was driving with friends on suspicion of having too many people in the car, and there are 4 people in the car. So then the officer pulls you over. He looks in the car. You only have 4 people in the car, so you don't have too many people in the car. But then there's this continuing, I want everybody's social security number.
Okay, so there's
And
an
then-
escalation.
Yes, and then, the person who's driving, either everybody gives me a social security number, or you're going down to the jail. And of course, in our community, there's a great fear of being Sarah Blanded when you go to the jail. So how do people report in terms of accountability for law enforcement without feeling that they may subject themselves to further victimization?
Good question. Anybody want to take that?
Well, now
Oh,
you're going to
yeah.
be calling Giuliani to report that. That's the answer.
Please don't say that.
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly, the reality is that the system, at least from a legal standpoint, is designed entirely to protect police officers from any accountability. And so while there are rare exceptions to that, and there are victories, that's what the system does. It's just true.
Okay. Next question over here.
Hi, Christy Griffin with the Ethics Project. When you're engaged in these conversations, there seems to be an absence of a discussion of the underlying poverty, the racism, the discrimination that is ongoing that has left our conversations, as well as the impact of mass incarceration on mental illness and on poverty. Is there a way to incorporate those
Well, I
issues
think
into the
Qiana, though,
conversation?
has been exemplifying that throughout. She's been very clear to all of us that 20 years ago when this issue happened, we still have the same circumstances at play. I think it's one of the things that we can all accept very readily, that the bias, the racism, the economic, chasm that exists between communities, not just here, but throughout the country, is very much one of the inciting factors for this. So I think, right, we can all agree that it's there. One more question in the back, please.
Hi, my name is Sandra Abron. The question I want to piggyback on what Brendan was saying about system accountability. What do we do? they constantly want to hold citizens accountable. What about the system when you have law enforcement officers that clearly are acting unjust? They're being protected. They're being the attorney general is holding their case. You know, there's a case going on right now in St. Louis City where two officers, the attorney general was trying to get two officers the case withdrawn to get another case. So, you know, they're being protected by the system. So
Well, hold that question, because in the next panel, we're going to have the newly elected district attorney, and that's one of the questions that I have for her, because she campaigned on the promise of having special prosecutors in fatal instances of police brutality. So I'm going to come back to you for that question in the next one, all right? Everybody, you've been great. Thank you so very much. Peace and love. Brendan and I, we're going to go hug it out in the back. Don't worry, we're going to be fine. Thank you so much. You have a good day.
Thank you, Qiana, Nancy, Brendan, Beth, and Juleyka.